Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to get on here today. I wanted to talk more about Ted Bundy. I believe that we can learn a lot from Ted Bundy. He did provide some interviews, and up until his execution, he did multiple interviews. And I think we can take some of his past history as a serial killer and we can learn from it. The reason that I want to talk about Ted particularly is because I see possibly some similarity with the mindset that may have been happening in the Idaho 4 murder case. I feel that for for those four students to have been savagely murdered, I feel like there has to be a certain mindset working in the assailant, or if it was multiple assailants. And I want to explore that more because I feel like it could really help us hone in on who the killer is and possibly why did this happen to them. I wish there was some type of simple way to figure all of this out. Now, again, as I said before, we have been investigating, we have been searching, we have been taking all the evidence that's been put out and leaked, and we've been going over it. But the one thing that no one has really looked at is what is the mindset of a person that could do such a crime as this, right? What were they thinking? How were they able to physically unalive four young students? Four people that would be fighting back, that would be healthy and strong and want to live. We need to think about that. We need to consider that. I know in some of my first videos, I always said that I felt it was a man, but I also feel that it could have been multiple people. Um, Maybe a man and a woman or a group. I don't know. But I think we have to consider what happened, the lack of evidence. We do not have a lot of DNA evidence. We do not have a lot of fingerprints to examine. We don't have a lot of foot impressions. Just a foot, the shoe print, and it being a latent print, and that having to uncover it. Was it in blood? They said they had to use chemicals, probably amino black, to uncover it. Was it showing a path that the killer possibly was on? Was there multiple steps? Was there multiple foot impressions? We just don't know, because that would also help to know if there was more than one assailant, if there were different shoe impressions or different sizes. So it's just so much to kind of consider and think about. But I do not want to overlook the psychology, the mindset, what was happening in this person's mind. Were they forced? Were they confronted in the attack to unalive more people? Or was that the intention all along? And I'm really concerned because there's a shoe impression outside of DM's bedroom on the second floor. Why was she not unalive? We have to think about that. Was her door locked at the time? In the probable cause affidavit, she said that someone walked past her. Well, how is that likely? I need help in understanding that. So today I'm here. I want to talk more about Ted Bundy. As I'm researching and learning more about him, his life, his upbringing, I'm learning more that everything started very young for him when he was a um, younger child, and he really had issues that started from his youth. Now, I'm going to talk about his past and what is known. This is not to upset anybody in his family or be accusatory to anybody in his family. These are just things that can help us in considering who could have possibly unalived those four Idaho students. Okay, so this is not an attack on Mr. Bundy or his family. This is just a conversation to try to understand the mindset of a serial killer. And we have to go back to the beginning when he was young and what happened to him and how he was raised and some of the things that built him into the person he became. So that's what this is going to be about. I want to talk overall first, and then I will play some short clips, some foundational clips about what was uncovered about him and some of the things that he said. Okay, so let's get started. Now, Ted Bundy, he believed that his mother was his sister. So when he was being raised that his grandparents were his actual parents and his mother was his sister. Now, how would that type of lie affect you? I don't know if his mother was very young when she had him, but the fact that he was being raised that his mother was his sister and his grandparents were his parents, that is two large lies. That is something that can maybe um, do something to a child or younger person if they find out the truth that everybody knows that they're being raised and they're not being told the truth, that they have concealed the fact that his mother is his sister, is being raised as his sister and not his mother. So I can only imagine what that could do to his mind and being lied to for so many years. Um, I know that that is the first relationship, the first bond that a child has is with the mother. And that is a tremendous lie. So that's something we're going to go over. Um, Now, Ted, in his interviews, he really tries to uphold this idea that his childhood was very normal, that he had a good childhood, that he attended church services, and he gained values that made him into a normal child, and that he came from a Christian home, that he had Christian parents. I think that he had to make this idea in his mind that he came from this type of environment because this was a safe place for him. To him going back and creating this idea that he came from a Christian home, it was important to him and he wanted to protect that. He wanted to protect his family to show that I just had a normal childhood. I didn't have any bad things happen to me. It was very normal. It was common. I attended church on Sundays. My parents, they were good. They raised me with good normal values. And I just had a typical childhood. But this was so far from the truth. But for a very long time, up until his execution, he wanted to protect that idea that his childhood was really a safe place for him. He was raised, he had a normal, healthy childhood, but this was not true. It was not true at all. So we're going to talk about that. Um, Also, notably, when Ted was younger, he was very shy in school, but he moved around a lot. I can recall when I was watching the videos, they kind of talked about um, his mother wanting to give him up. for adoption because she couldn't handle him. She really did not want to have a child. Um, she talks about in some of her interviews how when she found out that she was pregnant, she had Ted's father, Ted's biological father was never involved in his life, never was around. And at some points, Ted actually tried to look for him, but was not successful. His mom would not help him in that endeavor. But when she was pregnant with Ted, she actually tried um, to terminate the pregnancy. Um, she took some pills, and Ted's father took her to get the pills, but um, he did not. The pregnancy was not terminated, and thus she had Ted. So when she had Ted, she actually wanted to give him up. Um, I guess she considered adoption. So she was going to do that, and then her father came and got them. Now they briefly stayed with her dad, but at some point they moved around a lot. Later, she met her husband and they got married, and she had her husband adopt Ted, and that's how Ted got the last name Bundy. Her husband's name was Johnny Bundy, and I guess it was important for her to have a complete family, so she had her husband legally adopt Ted, and they changed his last name to Bundy. So that's how Ted got his last name, um, Ted Bundy. Okay. So let's just move on. When Ted was younger, he was considered highly intelligent, very smart, very quick witted. He was considered very charming. Um, he had an initial first girlfriend that he really, really adored and liked. Um, he had a lot of issues because she was considered high class. She had everything before her. Her family took well of her, and her future was pretty laid out for her. And she knew she would be successful. She had the support and money of her family. Excuse me. Um, the issue with that was it made Ted feel insecure. Ted felt insecure. He knew he could not provide the life that she was accustomed to, and that really bothered him. At some point, when she went off to college, they still were connecting, but they weren't really close. She ended the relationship, and Ted always admits that um, this was something that it really hurt him. This relationship ending was pretty devastating for him, and he grew angry. He wanted to respond um, in an unhealthy way. He was angry. He wanted revenge, and he wanted to get revenge against her. Many people feel that when she broke up with him and how devastated he felt because he really was in love with her, um, and he just wasn't able to kind of overcome some of the issues that he had. But because he wanted revenge against her. Many people feel like a lot of his victims later on, once he started um, to kill unalive women in 1974, they feel that a lot of the women looked very similar to her name was Diana. That they look very similar to her. So that was something very interesting that I learned. Um, he later on had another relationship, and initially the relationship was a healthy relationship. It was a good relationship. This was probably the relationship where he felt most comfortable. Um, the woman, she had a daughter, and he got into the relationship knowing that, and they had like a family life. They did a lot of things together, family related things, fishing, going out to the park, things like that. And for a while, that was able to be a healthy relationship. But at some point, Ted began to pull back from the relationship. Um, he admits that he felt like his desires to want to harm women, it grew very, very strong. His anger towards women, it continued to grow. And what he ended up doing, and his girlfriend at the time, she admits it when she looks back, that there was a point where she started to begin to notice that he was reducing the amount of time that he put into the relationship. He's reducing that family time. Ted was really changing, in her opinion, because he could no longer control that strong desire, that strong force to harm women. Um, so he began a secret life, right? He he wanted to pursue his habits that would help him probably calm down the strong desire, that strong force inside of him to harm women. So he started doing things by himself. And again, this is something that's going to help us understand the mindset, okay, of a serial killer. Now we're talking specifically about Ted Bundy. However, we want to be able to mirror, remember, project this on to a canvas and see, are there similarities? Are there things that can connect where we can apply this to this Idaho 4 murder case? What is the mindset of a killer? What are they thinking? How was their childhood? What were they doing when they were younger? How was their relationship to women? Were they able to have healthy relationships? Were they able to maintain relationships? Were they able to grow the relationship? Have a marriage, have kids, have a family life? Were they able to maintain all of these facets of a family life? Did they even want that? Or was their mind somewhere else? Was their focus somewhere else? Their thoughts somewhere else? Their desires somewhere else? Okay. So with Ted, he started to create a lot of secret habits that took him away from the family life. He reduced the time that he spent with his girlfriend and her daughter, and he began to do things like follow women. He would follow random women at night. He would become a stalker of people's time. Women that he desired, certain women, he began to watch them very closely. He began to learn their habits. He would follow them to wherever they went. If they went home, if they went to work, if they went to school, because remember, primarily, Ted, he was able to blend in to the campus life, to the student life. So a lot of his murders were near or at universities. And he lived in different states, right? He moved around a lot. He moved around a lot in his childhood, and when he became an adult, he moved around a lot from one state to another. Excuse me. Now he's starting to become a peeping Tom, a stalker of women, looking into the bare room of women, following them, watching them, learning their habits, right? So that's something that we can kind of place in the secret life, in their secret habits. This is something that a serial killer, a stalker, a ex offender, he might do, right? He might do that late at night where he can blend in, he can hide better, he can surveil in his car, he can get out of his car and walk around. And on a college campus, typically a lot of people are up late. They may be partying on the weekend. So you can blend right in, right? Remember, we're trying to learn these habits, okay? So that's something else that we're going to listen to. in these tapes. One thing that we know about Ted, you can see it in some of his pictures. If you go and you just view pictures of Ted, he was known as a very charismatic person, right? So in one of my videos, when I was talking about Ted, I talked about some of his ruses, right? Ted was very charming and he was handsome. He was handsome when he was a young man. Um, he would be able to talk to people. Women really liked him. They wanted to get to know him. He came across as very charming. Um, women liked him, and that allowed him to have their guard drop. Just looking at the physicality, seeing the charm, one might drop uh, their their level of protection of themselves because he's coming across as very friendly. Now, in his ruses, he would do things. For example, he might have a cast on and say, "Well, I'm unable to carry my school books because I have this cast on. So can you help me, sweetheart? Can you help me walk to the car and put my books, in the car?" And right there, he'd get one, and they become his victim. He did other ruses like go to a park and he say, "Hey, my sailboat, I can't lift it because I have this cast on. Do you think you can help me lift it? Two of you can help me lift it." And they walk right over and he'd attack them. He also did things like impersonate a police officer, right? Now, this is extremely dangerous behavior. He dressed like a police officer. He'd pull a woman over, get her to stop, and then now she's his victim. So um, he did a lot of diabolical things, but he used his charm, he used his physical appearance. That was something also that his first real girlfriend, Diane, said about him. She did not like how Ted would use people because Ted, he was not wealthy. He didn't come from um, a wealthy family, a rich family. So sometimes he would use people to get the things that he wanted. And because Diane, she saw that, that was another reason that she did not like that. She felt that Ted was a user and she didn't like that he was using people. He was very manipulative. So that's something else, you may possibly see in a serial killer. Not just the charm, but also the use of manipulation. Um, So that's something else we can look forward to when we play these videos. One of the doctors um, that sat down with Ted. Well, there was two main doctors. One doctor that had been seeing him for years. Um, Ted had reached out to her, so they had never met in person. They did telephone interviews, and she was able to gain knowledge from talking to him, and that happened over a period of years. Now, when Ted was facing um, the death penalty, he actually reached out to her and he wanted to see her. And this would be their one and first and only time meeting in person. Some things that she revealed, and also another doctor, a different doctor, he would meet with him as well, and different things he would reveal to them. Some things that had never really come out in the public. One of the things that uh, Ted revealed right before his execution, um, Ted revealed that he she asked him a question, the female doctor. She asked him a question that was very specific. And I think this was something that um, it was probably difficult for Ted to admit because remember, Ted really tried to uphold this image of the family, how the family was very wholesome and how he had a normal childhood, and that nothing ever really happened to him when he was younger, that he had a normal life. He attended church services every Sunday, that his parents were Christian. Um, and that was very important for him, and he protected the image of his family, and he wanted to maintain that image of his childhood because that was really a way that Ted could go back. He could hide, he could hide himself. Remember, the serial killer, he is wearing a mask. It is very, very difficult for the serial killer to assimilate into society. They have to um, act very hard, work very, very hard to put this mask on and wear it every day. They don't want the mask to slip. They don't want you to see how they really are, how dark they are, how evil they are, how their thoughts are, and then if something comes up, they're going to deny it. They're going to lie. Now, unless you can approve it, then they will tell the truth. But as long as they can, they will hide, they will put that away and kind of disassociate from it, right? So there was a few things that was working in the background. One was the murder of a little girl from Ted's neighborhood. When Ted was younger, there was a little girl that lived a few blocks away. Her name was Anne Marie Bird, and she was abducted and killed. Many, many years, people thought that Ted Bundy, this is an active serial killer, this murder happened right in your neighborhood. They thought that Ted did it. And her family would reach out to Ted, write letters to Ted, and Ted would deny it. He denied it up until his execution. And the reason that Ted denied it is because Ted said, well, let me explain this to you. I'm very sorry for your loss. However, when I was a child, I had a normal childhood. I was not offending. I was not doing this stalker activity. I was not following women. I was not hurting anyone, unaliving anyone. So I couldn't have killed Anne Marie. It wasn't me. I'm sorry. But if you have more questions for me, hey, keep writing me. So again, unless you can prove that he did it, he was not going to admit it. It's just like the cases that we've discussed with the different S offenders. They do not want to go to jail. They do not want the facts to come out. They want to hide everything they did, all the terrible things that they have done. They are going to hide it. And this is very, very important to Ted. The reason it's important to Ted is because remember, Ted has been protecting his childhood. He doesn't want to talk about, how his mother um, tried to terminate the pregnancy. He doesn't want to talk about how his mother was going to put him up for adoption, right? He doesn't want to talk about the lie that his mother was his sister or the other lie that his grandparents were his parents. He doesn't want to reveal any of that. Um, so the doctor was able to get Ted to answer a very specific question. And Ted told her, he said, well, I will answer this question, but we cannot record the answer. I don't want my voice admitting this to the world because again he's protecting that childhood that he hid all of these terrible things he did for so long. He's protecting his childhood. The question was there any S abuse with your sister? And Ted finally admitted the truth, and he said yes. He said yes. He wasn't going to lie anymore. And he said that there was against his sister when he was young. So let's go back to the abduction and the murder of Anne Marie. Ted was 14 years old when Anne Marie was abducted and unalive. Remember, he's saying, I didn't do anything when I was younger. I had a normal childhood. I was an average kid, right? I was a 14-year-old average boy. But it's not true. So again, some people he will drop his guard for, and he wanted the help of this female doctor right before his execution. Remember how manipulative the mindset is? I believe Ted thought, well, if I give her this truth, she will help me. She will tell them that I am not fit to be executed. And he asked the doctor, will you tell them that I'm not fit to be executed? And she told him, no, Ted, I cannot do that. You are a danger. You are a danger to society. We have gained the benefit of talking to you, learning about your mindset, your behaviors, some of the things that you did when you were a child and how that grew, this fantasy life that you had, how that grew into more. Because if you ask Ted, Ted would tell you, I'm going to tell you why I'm here. Two things got me here. I was drinking alcohol and I viewed pornography, books. He had an uncle and he would go to his house and look at pornography books when he was younger. But it's not the case. That did not lead Ted down this road. Now, it may have increased his fantasy life, but he already had this destructive mindset, this compulsion to harm women, this evil idea of seeking out the strong force inside of him to harm women. He just could not control it. That is the truth. He's not going to take responsibility up until the end. As a last ditch effort, Ted began to confess. Ted began to tell law enforcement about various murders. I believe that Ted Bundy is probably the most prolific serial killer because he admittedly went from state to state unaliving women. He could not remember all the details. At the time of his execution, I believe he confessed between 30 to 40 murders, but they believe it was upwards of 100 murders. Now, I brought you guys a case about 2 months or so ago about, I think his name was Nagrazi. I can't remember right now. Nagrazi Zuberi, something like that. Um, he right now, he left his state and abducted a woman, brought her back to his state, and put her into uh, uh, built like a cage to try to keep her trapped. Um, and he had a family and a child and all of that. And I believe that he may be something similar to Ted's behavior. So I'm hoping to keep track of his trial also. I think his name was uh, Nubari Zabari or something like that. I can't, Nagrazi Zabari, something like that. But go check it out on my page. I'm going to follow up and see where he is. The FBI was able to get him and take him down, which is really good. And now they're going to have to unpack all of his crimes. So that may take some time, just like it took some time for Ted and him. If he was not faced with his execution, I do not believe um, I do I do not believe that law enforcement would have been able to tie him to the various murders because he went from state to state. So some of his murders they were more impulse, like when he escaped jail. He immediately escaped jail when he would commit a murder. When he was younger, he did more of the stalking, more of the learning the victim, um, more of learning their habits. He would pick a woman, he would choose her, just certain ones. He would peek into the bedroom, be the peeping Tom, right? And this is what he would do in his free time at night. This is some of his secret habits. I think as he evolved, he didn't need to have that obsession with the victim. He would just have impulse and he would kill. So that's something else. I think that over time, um, the impulse may grow and may grow stronger, and you don't need all of this leg work leading up to the murder. You don't have necessarily the obsession of one woman, like he was killing in a frenzy. You know, four women he attacked at the Child Mega house in Florida, right? Two unalive, two alive to testify against him. So he just had a perversion for women. That is what it is, you guys. You know, that's where it is. He wanted to know where do they work, who were their friends, where did they go to school. But as that perversion grew, he would be more impulse attacks. So he did confess only at the end, because I think he thought it would buy him more time. If he continued to talk, if he continued to give them more murders, he was buying time essentially. But Florida, the state of Florida, was not having it with him. They were going to effectuate that death penalty no matter what. Um, he was really I believe the most prolific serial killer. Yeah. Um, so the whole purpose is we want to understand the psychology of why people kill. We must investigate that. We must, research these serial killers and S offenders, because in order for us to protect society, protect our communities, it gives us an advantage to learn their mindset. We need to know how they think. We need to know about their violent behaviors. Um, it helps us when we're educated, because we have to encounter them in real life situations. They live amongst us, right? And we don't want to be ignorant, and we don't want to hide the evil, the violence that they have. Most of us cannot imagine it. I would say the average person cannot imagine the evil that exists, the violence that exists. But we have to learn. This is how we protect society, right? Okay, so I think we're almost there to go over some of this case information. I just want to ensure that I've kind of given a thorough account of everything. Let's see. If you watched some of Ted's different videos of him, a lot of the doctors, he was diagnosed with multiple personalities, dissociative identity disorder, things like that. Um, I think when you watch him and he talks, because he loves to talk, um, the man slips, and you can see the charm, you can see the manipulation. What he's trying so hard to maintain, to control, to conceal, right? But if you listen to him, if you watch him, and if you're astute, a lot of people that didn't fall for his ruses, they were sharp. They said, "Oh no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going with you. No, I'm gonna wait for my brother to come, or I'll see if somebody else can help you, but I'm not going with you." So some people are sharp and they can see it. Um, but a lot of this goes back to his childhood. even though he's trying so hard to conceal it, when they go back and they investigate his childhood, so many people have some stories about Ted, right? About his behavior, how disturbing some of his behavior was when he was a teen. Ted did have a speech impediment when he was a teen, but he wasn't known for that. Some of his friends from childhood, they would go on to say that, you know, he was very disturbing. You know, how he would try to harm animals. He would do things like go around the house and put knives in the beds of people and see how they would respond when they get in the bed. There was an incident where he would go into the woods and dig these holes and put like spikes in them, and he would want to see if somebody would fall in them and get hurt. So he had a lot of disturbing behaviors, a lot of disturbing behaviors. So um, I think that as much as we're looking for a suspect now in the Idaho 4 murders, we also have to consider what is being said, what is known about that potential suspect. What happened in their childhood? How were they raised? What were their parents like? What was their personality like, right? You know, uh, do they have a lot of expression? You know, how do they respond to things? You know, what was their behavior amongst the group? You know, did they isolate themselves? You know, were they able to easily come into a group? You know, how did they express empathy? Did they have empathy? Did they not have any empathy? Sympathy for someone else? You know, I think it's important um, in the Idaho 4 murder case because law enforcement, they're looking for a suspect. They're looking for someone that has a violent tendency, that maybe has anger, resentment, hostility towards women. Maybe they stalked women, maybe they followed women. That's why I'm so concerned about law enforcement. And if they took the steps and investigated the stalker information relating to the girls, because I feel that maybe, possibly, this could have started out as a stalker situation where the person is following the girls. They learn that they go to the University of Idaho. They learn where they work. They learn where they live, all through just stalking, right? Following them, learning their habits. You know, they put their eye on them, and now they are learning their habits. But what is the next step, right? They're only going to be at a distance for so long. That obsession, when it's growing, it's in their fantasy, right? They have a secret life, and part of that fantasy life is going over everything in their mind. And when they get to a point where they can't control that anymore, it's going to lead to some destructive energies, destructive behavior. They're going to seek out eventually to harm that person. It's like a compulsion, they can't control it. And I think this possibly happened in the Idaho 4 case. This is definitely a possibility, right? One of many, because we don't know. There's no conviction, but just with the evidence that's been presented and been out in the public almost this last year, we really just don't know. So I want to learn more about Ted because I feel that it can help us in comparing notes when we look at the Idaho 4 murders. And again, going back to just the information that there was possibly a stalker. I think that is something that we cannot overlook. Um, and Maybe learning these things about Ted Bundy, maybe it can help us to figure out who could have been the type of person to go in and unalive all of these people. Because there's so similarities with the Chi Omega murders. Well, that was more of impulse, but just the attack, the sheer attack of being a bigger dwelling, multiple people there, and still going in and harming those women and unaliving two of them. So let's get started. I think we're ready to get started and listening to some of the commentary. I think I've covered most of everything. I didn't want to overlook anything. Um, so I think we're ready to go. Yeah. So let's do that. I covered as much as I could remember. So let's listen to some of the audio now because I want to bring this all together. Okay. And the video is actually 22 minutes. Um, I'll just highlight some of it. So the first part is where I'll let the first part is talking about Ted watching some violent pornography. And again, as I said, I don't necessarily I don't necessarily think that this is the end all, but I think we can definitely take some of the things known about him and see if it can relate to the murderer or murderers in the Idaho 4 case. Okay, so I guess we're starting off with. I don't think I want to start off with that. Um, so at one point in this interview, Ted talks about how he was not, um, physically abused in the home. He didn't have any S abuse in the home when he was a child. And I guess he's attributing again his behavior to watching, adult film and books, watching, reading adult film and books. Okay, so again, he's trying to uphold, this image of the family when he was younger. That he was a normal child, he was a normal boy. He came from this Christian lifestyle. So let's listen to some of this. So, oh, let me say this too. I apologize. This video is linked. Multiple videos is linked about Ted Bundy on the Hidden Horror Facebook page. This particular one was can be attributed to it's called Messy Messages. So just follow the link. I encourage you to watch the whole video. Okay, it's about 25 minutes, a little bit less than 25 minutes now, 23 minutes.
If there's two people in this world that are confused and trying to understand why the way they are, it's no doubt Bundy himself and his mother, Eleanor. In the last days of Ted's life, he's been confessing to murders. He's up to 30 at this point. Some he gives detail, some he can't really remember, and some he just gets confused with other ones, and many he just holds on to. But just as Ted is trying to figure out why he's done the things he's done, why he is the way he is, his mother is also trying to figure this out as well. Eleanor is trying to explain her son to the world, make some sense of what her child has become. It's really never talked about how much Eleanor knows about the crimes in detail, but she is convinced now that Ted is guilty in the end. Ted and his mother, they give the appearance in many interviews that Ted grew up in a Christian home, well loved and taken care of. But when you dig into the dirt of Ted's upbringing, we find many roots and bones twisted and tangled together. to where many things can be explained. Ted's life would start off in a weird way, to say the least. Ted was born in 1946, going by the name Theodore Robert Cowell. A lot of the time, what we see with serial killers when they are children, the smallest obsession can turn into something toxic in their adulthood. Whether it starts off simple, as scaring people, obsessing over fire, maybe a step further, harming animals, and showing.
Okay. I have to skip this video. I did want to say that Ted's mother, her name was Eleanor Bundy. She believed Ted. She would go and testify in court on Ted's behalf. She believed Ted was telling her the truth because they were very close. Now, in the end, after Ted began to confess all of the murders, then she had a change of heart. And she actually tried to seek out some of the families, the victims' families, and apologize. But she believed Ted to the end until right before his execution, he began to confess to all of these murders. And I think part of why Ted fought so hard to maintain his childhood as a safe place because it would reflect on his family and particularly his mother. And he was trying to, um, even in the end, try to protect that part of his life. The safe part that he could say was everything was okay when I was a child, but it was not true. It was not true at all. So I'm going to skip this video, this ad.
Signs of radical behavior, of being loud, and needing to be the center of attention, or the complete opposite, a very heavy introvert. Ted Bundy as a child falls into many of these categories, but his story is unique to most serial killers. Many doctors now say that narcissism is something that you're born with, disorder, something that most serial killers have, and what could attach itself to that are elements a person would have forming inside them that has no empathy. It could just be the start of something terrible. Ted was born in an unwedded mother's home in Burlington, Vermont. The simple story that most know is that Ted and his mother went to go live with his grandparents. Although Ted thought his mother was actually his sister and his grandparents were actually his mother and father, Ted and his mother would only be there a short time. But in that time, Ted would be raised by his grandfather, seeing him as the only male figure around. His grandfather, who was said to be a very violent man, have a very, very dangerous temper, who was said to scare by punishment. Many think that Ted's father could actually be his biological grandfather, but this would later on be disproven. The story would come out where Ted said he would do his own research, looking for his own father, his biological father. Ted said when he found out he was just illegitimate, he used it as a joke in small conversations. But Eleanor, Ted's mother, would not give much detail to this to the public. We do know this, that Eleanor tried to give Ted up for adoption, but her father, Ted's grandfather, would show up and take both of them to his home. When Ted talks about his childhood, he makes it sound happy, almost as though he was Leave It to Beaver. How he played with the kids, roaming through the woods, frog hunting, and even calling himself the king of frog hunting. Eleanor would eventually move her and Ted to Tacoma, Washington, where Eleanor had friends. She would go on to marry Johnny Bundy, legally adopting Ted and raising Ted as his own. Eleanor and Johnny start a family, Ted now having many new siblings. Ted did say this was hard for him. The life and love he had just with his mother was now having to be shared with many others. When flashing light on the dark parts of Ted's mind with his youth, there's one woman that really did a remarkable job with Ted, and who is renowned for her work in psychology with over 20 serial killers. Dr. Dorothy Lewis spent many years working with Ted before his death. Ted told Lewis personal things about his childhood that he didn't share with anybody else. Maybe it had to do with the fact that she was not interested in murders, but just Ted himself. Maybe it was as simple as Dorothy being a female. Ted felt more comfortable. One of the first and big elements Lewis notes with Ted is she believes that Ted has multiple personalities. Lois says many years after Ted was already executed and gone, she would start receiving letters in the mail, packets, from Ted's ex-wife, Carol Boone. They were love letters to Boone that Ted wrote to her, and just some ranting and raving. Dorothy noticed something with these letters. She noticed sometimes Ted would sign his own name, simply saying Ted, when he was done with the letter. And then sometimes, letters that are more ranting and raving would be signed by Ted's grandfather's name, Sam, making her think that the man writing the love letters to Carol was Ted, and the one writing the more aggressive letters was Sam, the side of Ted that killed. She noticed something else with Ted over the years, that Ted could change his facial expressions to almost where he could look like a completely different person when he was mad or playing the part of the innocent man. The one side of his face showing empathy, confusion, why all this has happened, and then the other, mad, angry, lack of empathy, sadistic. Lewis herself said, I don't think I ever met the Ted that killed. Right before Ted's execution, he asked Dorothy if she would come and see him before he was executed. When she arrived to talk to Ted, they would talk for 4.5 hours straight. The man she had talked to for years now, right in front of her for the last time. But this time was different. Ted was not hiding what he was and opens up to Lewis. She soon found.
You heard what he just said? Ted was no longer hiding what he was. He had no reason to, right? He's confessing to these murders. He's trying to save his life. He's not trying to use charm. He might be using a little manipulation, but he's not hiding anymore. The mask is off. Now he can be his true self. And he's admitting to these murders because he wants more time. He does not want to be executed. Now he's going to admit to the S abuse because he wants to use her. He wants her to go and say he's not fit to be executed, but she's not buying it. She's not buying it at all. Um, there's so many great things in this video. I just kind of let it run. They did bring up some narcissism and said that he was possibly born with it as a disorder and that he showed no empathy. No empathy. So part of his brain is not responding to normal stimuli. If a person is hurt, he's actually setting traps to hurt people. He had no empathy, none. So I wanted to notate that. Um, I found that interesting that he was signing the letters in two different names. The nice letters, the romantic letters, he was signing them as Ted. The more ranting, angry letters, he was signing them as Sam. I know they brought up how Ted could change his facial expressions. Something else that I learned from watching a different video, um, every time that Ted would be arrested and there would be time for a lineup, he would change his hair. He would grow it out long, or he would cut it all off, or he would comb it a different way. He was doing that to alter his appearance so when it was time to be in the lineup, he would look differently. He did not want to be picked out as the assailant. It's just very manipulative. Trying to see, did we miss anything? Okay, so let me see if I can get kind of some control. So many good things in this interview. Let's keep going because they're going to talk next about Ted assaulting his sister at a young age. And this is pivotal because this goes to thwart the idea that Ted had a normal childhood, that it was a healthy childhood, and he was a normal boy. He was not. He was not for a very long time. So I want you to hear that. And I also want to highlight that Ted, and I said this already, but Ted did want to know who his real father was. His mom would not help him in that effort. And I think some of what Ted was trying to figure out was who he was. Sometimes when you're so evil, you want to try to understand the why. And I think this is why he studied psychology for his degree. He was trying to really understand himself. So he would do things like try to find his dad, his real biological dad, because he didn't see these evil traits in his mom. He didn't feel like he was being raised in any type of bad environment, any type of negativity. He felt that he had a normal childhood. His parents were Christian. They went to church every Sunday. So his behaviors, his mindset did not go along with what his life was like. He was being raised in a home with siblings, um, with two caring parents, a mom that cared and loved him. So I think he was trying to pursue um, his real dad and find him to try to understand himself, understand why did he have this evil inside of him. Um, so let's continue.
Found out, though, that Ted wanted her there to say he was unfit to be executed. But Dorothy simply looked at Ted and said there's no way she could say that. Ted said he understood. As they start talking, they dive into Ted's childhood, and Dorothy asked Ted if he ever looked at his sisters in any way with perversion. Happy
Sorry,
kids
guys,
are
because
successful
the
kids.
ad
When you
might
choose
give
a
it.
tuition-free K-12 powered version, Ted looks up at Dorothy and says, I swore I would never tell anyone about this. Dorothy asks Ted if he wants her to turn on the recorder. He says yes. Ted will then start to tell Dorothy of him assaulting his sister when he was at a very young age. With this, we now have evidence of Ted as a young boy already hurting women and knowing that this truly is instilled in him at a very young age. Dorothy said that when she talked to Eleanor, she said something very interesting, something that was not known to the general public. She said that the man that was Ted's real father took her to have an abortion very early on. Eleanor said that she took pills, but the baby inside her, Ted, would survive. It's unclear if Ted ever knew this. With so many secrets in their family already, it's hard to see Eleanor telling Ted about this.
And that's a, remember, you guys, that is another big secret that his mom wanted to terminate the pregnancy. She tried to, but somehow, some way, he survived. So we don't know if Ted knew that or not. But we do see that there was a lot of family secrets with his mom, and maybe that's some of his anger too, right? She wanted to give him up for adoption, but his grandfather came and took them, and they didn't stay long with him, and they continued to move around. But that's another big thing, just the parent not wanting you. That could maybe have some effect on him in a negative way. Um, so I just want to go back a little bit. When Ted admits off the record, off the, they stopped the recording, that he did assault um, his sister. Um, this is a big omission. I don't know how much I can express that, but this is a really huge omission because thus far, all of his life, he has upholded this image in his mind about the family, protecting that image. Um, but the truth is, just like any other family, they had issues, right? They had major issues. And I think this was important to him, but I know there had to be some internal conflict because knowing all of these things, believing that your mother is your sister, that your grandparents are your parents, and knowing the truth that your mom tried to terminate you, give you up for adoption, that could be a way um, of having an understanding of maybe why some of this in his mind is not settling right, to not be wanted, to maybe potentially think you're not loved, even though he was close with his mom. His mom supported him to the end, believed him to the end, would go to different trials that he had and testify on his behalf because she loved him. She really did. It's just uh, she believed that he was innocent, and he was not. He was not innocent, and I think the realization of that was probably difficult for her, but she changed. She immediately changed and tried to reach out to the victims' families to offer her apologies. Okay, so let's keep going.
As the interview comes to an end, Dorothy said it would end this way. When Ted and I were done with the interview, he got up, bent down, and kissed me on the cheek. And so I kissed him on the cheek, and he walked out. I was trying to make light of it when I got home. I walked into my kitchen, and my husband and my daughter were there. And I said, "You were looking at the last woman to kiss Ted Bundy." As Ted started to get into his early teens, it said that Ted had a little bit of a speech impediment and started to show weird behavior, to where the neighborhood kids remembered this, staying with them all the way into their adulthood. There's a story of Ted taking a cat. He would hang it up with rope and then light a match to the cat, to where the children would come running and see this. They said Ted found it funny, but obviously disturbing to the other children. The other stories that would come from Ted's family when he was a young boy is that he would take kitchen knives, placing them in people's beds while they were asleep in it or just out of it. One of the most surprising things is that Ted would go in the woods, on trails, dig out a hole, putting spikes in the hole, and then covering it back up with leaves, to where a young girl in the neighborhood would step in it and severely hurt herself. These stories would be kept secret by Ted's family and would only make its way to the public from the kids that actually saw it happen. But one of the biggest stories connected to Ted's childhood would be
Okay, so that's just some this very disturbing behavior. Who puts knives in beds, trying to figure out what's going to happen? It's like he was testing the water very early on as a young teenager, just going into the woods and creating this trap with the spikes. Um, just very disturbing behavior digging that hole. So now they're going to talk about next the story of what happened to little Anne Marie Bird, how she was abducted from her home, how the person came right into, opened unlocked the window and came in and abducted her and then killed her. So I want you to hear a little bit about that too. So let's play that.
he was 14 years old, still living in his family home in a neighborhood that his uncle also lived in. But in this neighborhood, many people believe this is where Ted committed his first murder. Ted lived just around the block from an 8-year-old girl that would go missing, and her name was Anne Marie. Still to this day, Anne has never been found, and the case has never been solved. But this is what we know about the case. On August 31st, 1961, a window in the Burr residence that was already unlocked, someone late at night put a stool under it and climbed through the window, went into Anne's room, and took her right out of the house. The short story of it is that the parents will become aware of it very fast, searching through the house for Anne, finding the window, then finding the door, running out into the neighborhood, waking the neighbors, to where everyone is looking for Anne. No one obviously knowing that one of the most famous serial killers is living around the block himself, but he's only 14 years old. We know that Ted was fully aware.
So Anne Marie, when she was abducted, her family immediately responded looking for her. Now, they did not know that this would have been allegedly Ted's first murder, first abduction, first murder. Um, but they were just living blocks away. And a lot of people for many years believed that Ted abducted Anne Marie, but he denied it. There will be different letters written to him, and while he was in prison, and he denied it. Um, but we know what Ted is capable of if he's going to assault his own sister as a teen, right? And he had he had the ups on this little 8 year old, the ability to watch her, to follow her, to see her in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of people that believe that he did harm Anne Marie and did this crime. He does admit, I believe, I'm not sure if it's in this video or a different video, but he did admit to doing something as a teen. I can't remember if it's this video or a different video, where he was doing some stalking. Um, so let's continue on. Um, I want to get to where they start talking about Ted's first girlfriend, because I believe this is when Ted is really, the desires in him are growing, growing, growing. They're getting so strong against women that he's going to start offending. And I believe the trigger was when Diane left him, broke off the relationship. He was devastated. He was angry. Um, and I believe this could have catapulted him into start some of his dark behaviors, the stalking, the following women, and learning about women habits, things like that, looking into windows, things like that. And then the next full relationship he gets into, the committed relationship he gets into, um, he reduces that time, that family time, and he's now spending time in this dark way. So let's go to that. Let's get there. Start here.
In his youth, Ted's uncle would also live not far from him, in the same neighborhood, just around the corner. Ted would go to his uncle's house and find detective magazines. These magazines, they show women being bound and put in submissive situations that are not kind to the women. Ted said in one of his last famous interviews that these detective magazines led to much of his obsession and molded him in becoming what he was. You can believe that Ted is telling you the truth, but there's no doubt that there was more there than just that. There was a small seed planted in Ted, somewhere very early on, before he found these magazines. And the magazines just fueled the desires even more. When Ted is going into high school, many things become quiet, and Ted starts to change. He's more in control of his actions, but in this time, we know that Ted's obsession is growing and getting to where it's overflowing, to where he's losing his patience more and more each day. Ted will finish high school and then go straight into college. When Ted is in his first relationship with a young girl named Diana Edwards, he talks about it as being a very special and impactful moment in his life. Says the first time he has a girlfriend, they do normal things. They drive around, spending time with each other, holding hands, kissing, whispering into each other's ears. There's no doubt that Ted was absolutely in love with Diana, but also he's dealing with this thing inside him that he has not let out yet. Diana came from an upper class family. She had nice clothes, nice parents, a nice car. Her whole future was laid out right in front of her. This was a huge element Ted was attracted to by Diana. Ted did not come from money, and he really didn't have nice things. And the jobs he was working were just minimum wage jobs. Diana said that she found Ted to be very emotional, and she didn't like how he used people to get things he wanted. And she could tell Ted liked Diana's things, maybe more than he liked Diana. Ted would say this about Diana, his first girlfriend, in an interview. I experienced any number of insecurities with Diana. There were occasions when I felt she expected a great deal more from me than I was really capable of giving. I was not in any position to take her out and squire her around in a manner that she was accustomed. In 1968, Diana graduated and she moved to San Francisco for a job. Her relationship with Ted became long distance for a very short time. Diana started writing less and less to Ted and eventually breaking the relationship off. Ted said that he was devastated by this, saying, I had this overwhelming feeling of rejection. And Ted said he admitted that he began to desire to get some sort of revenge on Diana. Many think that Ted went after many of the victims because they had a similar look to Diana. But there's a very small part in time where Ted actually goes to college, gets a degree in psychology, starts to build somewhat of a life, looking normal, trying to really be someone. Even after Ted graduates, there's a story that comes out.
So remember, he's trying to appear normal, to blend into society. But this breakup with Diana, he took it very, very hard. He felt devastated and he wanted revenge against her. Many people feel that this is why he targeted the Pacific look of the women, the color of the hair, because this was matching closely a similar look to Diana. I think we're going to go, and this will be the last piece um, that we listen to.
The camera pans to Ted. It's obvious that Ted still believes that he'll walk out, that he's not going to be found guilty, that he'll trick the court system once again into believing he's just the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. But as Ted goes through both trials and is sentenced to death in both of them, he will plead his innocence for the next 10 years while in prison, and Eleanor will do the same for Ted, still doing interviews and pleading and even trying to get Ted out of jail. It wasn't until the last few days of Ted's life that he finally started confessing when he ran out of stents and the mayor of Florida said Ted would go to the electric chair on January 24th, 1989. Ted starts confessing to murders, hoping he can buy himself more time, but it's too late. When Ted is finally put to death, Eleanor has had a very intense week herself. Her son's been accused of killing at least 40 women, and before he was sent to death, he confirmed at least 30. She now has to take responsibility with her own emotions and see that her first child made her into a victim herself, the way she stood up for him, where he lied to her all this time. He's completely sabotaged the family name. But in this, Eleanor will start doing something remarkable, expressing her deepest sorrow and apology as Ted's mother as she can. She contacts some of the mothers of Ted's victims, trying just to say she's simply sorry and what Ted couldn't do in life. Eleanor finds herself doing, truly apologizing, and simply saying she doesn't know what happened or what led Ted to be what he was. She's truly confused. It's safe to say there's still many secrets in the Bundy family that have never really come out, and it's obvious that Eleanor, she did not raise her son to be a monster.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. I implore you to watch the whole video because you just can't go over every part of the person's video. Um, I just want to go back to the reasoning behind why I'm bringing this to you. I feel that in Idaho 4 case, it's going to be helpful within the case and in our everyday lives in order to protect society, our community. It's important for us to learn things that we can use now. We have to learn the source of this violent behavior. If we do not educate ourselves, if we do not prepare ourselves for these situations, these type of encounters, this type of crime that's happening, We're going to be ignorant to what is possible. It's an unimagined evil, violence that you cannot prepare yourself for. This is what has happened in the Idaho 4 case. And if we do not start looking at the psychology of the killer or killers, we're in trouble. We must learn, we must study, we must investigate, we must research the mindset of these killers and these S offenders. Okay, so that's why I'm bringing this to you. I might do a little bit more research on Ted Bundy if I feel it can be helpful in sharing that. I'm not sure how much more I can learn and glean from his life and his various murders. But if I feel it's helpful, I'm going to bring it, especially in this Idaho 4 case. So I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope you learned a lot. I hope that something like this is going to be a takeaway for you, and you can share this information with someone that you know, right? So, I want you to have a beautiful Sunday. Thank you for checking out this video. Please check out some of my other videos. Okay, stay safe, stay smart, stay savvy. Take care and be well, friends. Bye, friends.